Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Town Hall with the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston. My name is Marla McGuinness, and I will be your moderator. For those joining us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about how tonight will work. Earlier this evening, several Nova Scotians received a phone call invitation inviting them to join us in tonight's Town Hall. Those who have chosen to participate will have the opportunity to ask a question directly to the Premier about any topic that's been on their mind. If you received the invite by phone and you would like to ask a question, please hit *3 to be added to the queue. Just a note, *3 will only work if you received the phone invitation. But if you didn't receive an invite this time and you still want your chance to talk to the Premier, that can be arranged. We're broadcasting live tonight on the Nova Scotia Government Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Those of you joining us through either of those forums can email a question to nstownhall@novascotia.ca. I think I speak for all Nova Scotians when I say this has been a very difficult week for our province. So now, more than ever, is a time that we should make sure that we're connected. So tonight we have an hour together, and I'll do my best to get to as many of you as possible. So for those of you on the phones, now is the time to hit *3 to talk to the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, and ask your question. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, Premier, why don't you start us off by sharing what's been on your mind this week?
Thank you, Marla. Good evening, folks. It's been incredibly difficult time for our province over the last month, but certainly in the last week with the floods. Just incredibly difficult time, and every day I'm reminded of our strength, of that blue noser spirit. When I hear more and more stories of the heroes that we have around the province that have been stepping up to help people. What some Nova Scotians have experienced, not only this week, but over the last few years with weather, it's completely unimaginable. It's stuff we think we're going to see on TV, and it's happening here in our province. So to those 3 Nova Scotia families who are living everyone's worst nightmare, there are absolutely no words I can say to appropriately convey the condolences of the province and the sadness we all feel, and certainly the sadness that I feel for sure. We can always rebuild roads and bridges and repair homes and pump out basements, but we can never bring back the loved ones we've lost. Their loss will be the legacy of these floods, and we continue to pray for the return of the soul who remains missing. Our prayers are there for sure for the family. But I can't say thank you enough to our first responders who go above and beyond time and time again. They risk their own lives for all of us. When the phone rings, they answer it and they respond. And I'm constantly amazed to the first responders, to your dedication and your heart. Thank you for your service to our communities. Another group who is owed a debt of gratitude are our healthcare workers, and I'm so pleased to tell each of you today that today our nurses came out in full force to ratify a new contract. Over 87% of our nurses voted in favor of the contract that had been negotiated. This is an important step for healthcare in this province, and it comes on the heels of last week. Last week, 85% of doctors voted in favor of their new contract. So in 2 weeks, significant contracts endorsed by significant numbers of healthcare workers, nurses, and doctors. We thank you for that. My personal commitment, the commitment of our government, is to make every single effort to be fair and to do more for our healthcare professionals, including our nurses and our doctors, and all of the allied healthcare professionals that keep us healthy and are there for us. So I'm happy to talk to you tonight about healthcare. I'm happy to talk about the floods. I'm happy to talk about the carbon tax. I'm happy to talk about housing. I'm happy to talk about whatever is on your mind. So if you would like to ask a question and you're on the phone, please press *3 now on your keypad, but I'm happy to take your questions. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Premier. Now, each time we've done one of these, there are questions that we can't get to inevitably. So we're going to start with one we didn't get to last time that came in through email. And now that question is from Dale McKinnon. And Dale asks, will mobile clinics visit areas that are known to have marginalized and homeless communities?
Thank you, Dale, for this important question. So, of course, I was recently at the premiers' conferences in Winnipeg. All the premiers were there. We had an opportunity to meet with pharmacy representatives from across the country. And I will tell you that those pharmacy representatives, a number of them said, like, we're so impressed with what's happening in Nova Scotia, your expansion of scope for pharmacies. So Nova Scotia is leading the way in what we're doing to pharmacies. A lot of people at the conference talked about the virtual care option and how we're leading the way there. But certainly, mobile clinics are another aspect of our response to making sure that Nova Scotians have access to care. Of course, we want everyone to have access to a primary care physician, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, some consistent. Of course, we want, and we're happy to talk tonight about some of the steps we're taking on that. But the pharmacy clinics, the virtual care, the mobile clinics are an important part of access to healthcare for Nova Scotians. So the answer, Dale, is yes. We're going to continue to make mobile clinics available around the province. Certainly in areas where we see the need is high, we try to prioritize for those mobile clinics. And just so everyone's aware, I mean, some of the things that can happen at those mobile clinics, prescription refills, diagnosis of a number of ailments. So we'll continue to add targeted initiatives like mobile outreach street health clinics that are there to serve those who are homeless or maybe don't have secure housing at the time. So the mobile outreach street health clinics will be part of this as well. We'll continue to look to expand these. But look, we know the issues in healthcare. We know the issues around access to healthcare are real, but I'm very proud of the work that the team is doing at the Nova Scotia Health Authority, led by interim CEO Karen Oldfield, by the minister, by the health leadership team, by every single healthcare worker around the province. We are moving the needle. And it's, I'm an impatient person. I wish it was moving faster, but the needle is moving for sure. But thank you, Dale, for that important question about the mobile clinics. They serve an important part.
Thank you, Premier. Seeing lots of great questions coming in now on the phone. We're going to start in Halifax with Amelia, and Amelia would like to ask about climate change. Go ahead, Amelia, with your question.
Hello, Premier Houston. So you've talked about the floods just a moment ago, and we know that the floods were likely an impact of climate change. So I want to know how you're going to strengthen your climate plan as a result, and specifically how you're going to ensure that Nova Scotia Power strengthens their emissions targets and meets those targets, because if I remember correctly, not too long ago, they were not meeting their targets. And the current targets that they have set aren't even enough to really ensure that we as a province are doing our part to fight climate change.
Thank you, Amelia, for this important question. Obviously, in the short time I've had the privilege of being Premier at 19, 20 months now, somewhere in that range, we've seen our fair share of climate crises for sure. Obviously we had the floods in Antigonish and Cape Breton, and then we had Hurricane Fiona, we had the fires, and now the floods this time, where we have the tragic loss of life. So there's no question that the climate is changing. There's no question that we all have a role to play in protecting our planet. There's no question that government has a role to play. So some of the things that we've done, I mean, we'll continue to execute on our plan to protect the planet. One of the first pieces of legislation we passed as a new government was a piece of legislation that legislated goals to address climate change. I believe that even as we sit here today, it's the most aggressive legislation, possibly the only legislation in the country that actually legislates a number of goals. There's about 30 goals. So they're ambitious goals for sure. They're some of the most ambitious goals in the country. So we want to work towards those goals for sure. We want Nova Scotia Power to be a good partner in that, and we'll continue to work with them on that. But in our climate change plan, and we do have a plan, and that's available online, and I'd encourage you hopefully to have some time to look at that. But in that climate change plan, we have 68 goals. So it's extensive and it's fulsome, and we will hold Nova Scotia Power to account in making sure that they do their part. But in terms of Nova Scotia Power in the generation of electricity, we still use coal for a portion of our grid. Our grid is getting greener. When the Muskrat Falls energy flows, it's that's nice green energy. It's had some troubles, but it can be a big part of the puzzle here. Of course, solar is part of it. Wind is part of it, and I think we have actually a lot of potential in certain regions of the province around geothermal. Underwater, the old mines have some ability to produce some nice green energy, but the real opportunities that we have in this province are in offshore wind. World-class wind speeds. We have incredible offshore wind potential, and I still find it shocking that Canada as a country, with our incredibly beautiful, vast shorelines and offshore, Canada as a country has zero offshore wind, zero. It's just I can't get my head around that. You don't have to go too far to see it. I've seen it with my own eyes in France and Scotland and other areas. So in Nova Scotia we have incredible potential. We need the federal government to be a partner on turning that offshore wind into reality. We need them to be a partner because they control the regulations on what happens in the oceans and offshore. So we're waiting on them to come up with regulations. They told us that those regulations could potentially come in the fall. I kind of forgot to ask which fall because I thought it was going to be last fall, but I'm still hopeful that they understand the seriousness of that. The offshore wind holds incredible potential to green our grids and produce green energy that we can ultimately sell to other jurisdictions who are looking for that green energy. And also, of course, the biggest opportunity we really have on greening our grid is the Bay of Fundy. What an asset we have. Other parts of the world and the country they just dream that they could have an asset like that. If you take every river in the world and add them together, you may come close to the strength of the Bay of Fundy. And imagine it's completely untapped in terms of producing electricity. So big potential there. That's why people might have heard me when I was upset. And people say, "Oh, you're always fighting with the federal government." Well, I was really upset when the federal government shut down Sustainable Marine for no good reason, and they're trying to understand how we can harness the power of the Bay of Fundy. Other companies are looking to it as well, but offshore wind, the Bay of Fundy, significant opportunities for our province that don't exist in other areas. We want to make sure that we harness that to green our grid, produce green electricity, to produce green hydrogen for Nova Scotians to use, but also that we can sell to the world. So our climate is changing. we have a plan. We have legislated plans, and there's a lot we can do in this province. And I believe Nova Scotians at their core are environmentalists. We see it in our farmers, we see it in our fishers, we see it in our foresters, and we just see it in Nova Scotians. We all want to do our part, as I do, and as I'm sure Amelia, you do as well. So I thank you for that question, and there's a lot we can do, and we're anxious to do it.
Thank you, Premier. Seeing a lot of great questions coming in, but mostly focused in Halifax. So if you're in Sydney, Port Hawkesbury, Amherst, Yarmouth, anywhere in between, we want to hear from you too. So just a reminder, you can hit *3 if you're joining us on the phone to get in the queue to ask your question. And if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, you can email us at nstownhall@novascotia.ca. Next, we'll go to Karen. Karen is joining us from Halifax, and she wants to talk about doctors. Karen, go ahead with your question.
My question is, presently we have a lack of doctors. We've got over 100,000 people waiting to get a doctor. When we are getting doctors, they are mainly foreigners from another country, and they're only allowing you to ask one question when you go see them. I question why we're not supporting our university candidates by paying their university tuition and maybe having them do a 5-year, a 10-year commitment to remaining in the province, whether there's other ideas. I don't quite understand the one question thing. I find it almost insulting because if you have one issue that has multiple pieces to it, you can't possibly be serviced. So then you got to book for the next week and then the next week. So there's a big problem with what's going on, not only that we don't have doctors, but the ones we have are only allowing us to ask one question.
Thank you, Karen. This is a great question for sure. I actually think it's one question. I think the two issues are tied together. A couple of things I want to say is absolutely we know that there's a lot of Nova Scotians that are on the list that need access to a primary caregiver, whether that's a doctor or a nurse practitioner. I know it's a big number. the number makes my hair turn gray. There's no question about that. It's something that I'm very focused on. So what I would say is a couple of things. So we continue to recruit doctors. Last year we recruited 168 doctors. That was kind of, I think that was a record number for the province. It was to replace some vacancies. It was to replace some doctors that retired. So it was 168 that came in, but 85 net new. So 85 net new is progress. There's a lot of work to do. I want to speak to your question about supporting, let's call it Nova Scotia students. There's a lot of smart Nova Scotia students who love to go to med school. I have in the past expressed concerns. I don't think it would be a surprise that I've had some frustrations with Dalhousie. But we are investing in a new medical school, a new medical campus at Cape Breton University. I'm really excited about this. Part of the criteria to go to that medical school at Cape Breton University is a return of service agreement. So you do have to sign on that you will, when you graduate, practice medicine in Nova Scotia. I believe those, we can use the fact that we have Cape Breton University has agreed to do that as a discussion point with Dalhousie to make sure that more of their grads stay in Nova Scotia as well. So I think that's important. That will open up opportunities for Nova Scotians. Actually, the day I announced it, one of the young ladies I talked to just as I left the stage was a paramedic who told me she's now going to go to med school. She hadn't thought of it before, but now that there's one in her community and the options there, that she'll do it, and she wants to stay in Nova Scotia and practice medicine. So that's a good thing. Training more doctors with connections to Nova Scotia is a good thing. But doctor recruitment across the country has been an issue for sure. That's why I'm incredibly proud of the act that we recently passed, the Patient Access to Care Act. This is an act that talks about common sense credentialing. And under this act, we'll work with the licensing bodies, but basically under this act, you're a doctor in the United States, in good standing, good enough for the United States, good enough for Nova Scotia. And in fact, it's been so bad with the doctor mobility that I can actually say, you're a doctor in Ontario in good standing, good enough for Ontario, good enough for Nova Scotia, because both of those scenarios often required a lot of paperwork, maybe some more exams, and it just took a lot of time, and it discouraged doctors from trying to come to Nova Scotia. So now under this particular act, we're using common sense credentialing so that we can get people the care they need from properly qualified professionals. And I do want to give a little shout out to the Nurses College in particular. So we have somewhere in the range of about 1,500 nursing vacancies in the province. 1,500 vacancies is a big number. But since we passed that act and we pre-approved certain countries where we would accept the training and accept the experience and license them, use common sense in licensing them, since we passed that act, which has only been a few months now, we have somewhere in the range of 15,000 nurses that now want to come to Nova Scotia from countries like the United States, the UK, Australia, the Philippines, others as well. So the licensing body is working through that. I think even this week we're going to start to onboard 161 new nurses. We'll continue to do that. So I'm very, I feel good that we'll be able to make a big dent and possibly fill those vacancies in a reasonable period of time and onboard people. That's a big, important thing because the nurses are critical to the healthcare system running. So when you have that number of vacancies, it causes problems. So the new nurse contract today, the new doctor's contract last week, all of these things are part of fixing healthcare. But it's been an issue across the country, and I don't want to just finally say that as we talked a little bit with Dale about the mobile clinics in response to Dale's email, the pharmacy clinics that people can go to, the mobile clinics, the primary care clinics, the virtual care, these are all ways that people can access care, even when they don't have a family doctor. But I think, Karen, a couple things there that hopefully answer your question. The new medical school is supporting Nova Scotia students, the recruitment process, the common sense credentialing to fill some of these vacancies and really, really support those working in the healthcare system so that they can support each of us who's looking to access care. They're all parts of fixing healthcare, and the needle is moving. I was stopped last night by two doctors who told me, hey, keep doing what you're doing. There's more work to be done, but keep doing what you're doing. us working, that we, the people working in healthcare, we feel the positive change. And somebody, again, this morning said the same thing. So we know there's work to be done, but I would tell you our focus on fixing healthcare is as strong as it has ever been, because that's exactly what you deserve.
Thank you, Premier. And just a reminder, you can ask a question as well if you hit *3 on your phone. And for those participating by Facebook or by YouTube, you can email us at nstownhall@novascotia.ca to ask the Premier your question. Okay, next we're going to jump back to talking about the environment. Brenda has a question about carbon tax. And in true Nova Scotia fashion, Premier, Brenda actually knew your father. Go ahead, Brenda.
Hello, Premier. How are you today?
Hi, Brenda. I'm happy to hear from you.
I'm glad to talk to you. I'm just wondering what carbon tax is doing for us, and all this devastation that we've had with all the loss of homes and the fires and the floods and whatever, and gas is going up again 6 cents tonight. I think it's devastating to go through that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Brenda.
It's puzzling. It's puzzling. I don't understand what carbon tax is.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I can tell you it's probably the number one thing people mention to me. They don't understand the carbon tax. What the carbon tax is doing is making life a lot less affordable for Nova Scotians. We've seen it in the price of gas, but I'm really worried that we're really going to see it as we head into winter and people start to heat their homes again. But you see it in a more less obvious way. You'll see it in the price of everything that you buy that needs to be moved, because as the price of fuel goes up and the price to move things around go up, then that gets passed on to us. So the carbon tax, what it certainly is doing is making life less affordable for Nova Scotians. What it's not doing, and what I can't see how it will do it, is protect the planet. And the reason is all the things we're talking about. We're a rural province. We have to drive. Like that's just the reality for most Nova Scotians. You know, public transit is not an option for most Nova Scotians from where they live. Taking their bicycle to work, not an option for most Nova Scotians from where they live. Putting the kids in their hockey gear on the back of the bike to drive them to hockey practice, it's not an option. It's just not realistic. Taking the kids to dance, not on your bike, not an option. Walking, not an option for people who in a rural province like ours. So that means they have to drive. So if you have to continue to drive at the pace you had previously been driving at, what benefit is to the planet? They're not reducing your driving, so it's not helping the planet. But what's happening is you're paying a lot more to move around. And that doesn't make sense, because it's not helping the planet, but it's just making your life a lot less affordable. So we submitted a plan. It was actually called Better Than a Carbon Tax, because it was better than a carbon tax, because it would actually help the planet. We are focused on helping the planet. That's why we did the legislation that I talked to a little bit about to Amelia earlier. That's why we're focused on offshore wind. That's why we're focused on hydro opportunities, because we're actually concerned about helping the planet. And the carbon tax, it may be fine in downtown Toronto, and it may be fine in Montreal, and it may be fine in other big city areas where they do have public transit options, or it may be fine in a different climate where you don't have to heat your home in the winter. But we have to drive, and we have to heat our home, and we have to do these things. So a carbon tax is a blunt instrument that is not effective at protecting the planet here in this province. The plan that we submitted, Better Than a Carbon Tax, it was fulsome. The federal government rejected that plan, and they rejected that plan because it didn't include a carbon tax. So you see where this is. They wanted a carbon tax. They're not actually concerned about protecting the planet. They're concerned about a carbon tax. So yes, the climate is changing. It's a real thing. The climate is changing. Yes, governments have a responsibility to do something, and we're doing a number of things with the goals and targets. We're a number of initiatives to try and get people off heating oil, a number of initiatives to protect the planet in many ways, but the carbon tax just doesn't do it. So, you know, I'm frustrated by the carbon tax. I know Nova Scotians are frustrated by the carbon tax because Nova Scotians are common sense people, and they see that the carbon tax is not about helping the planet. It's just about a new tax. So we'll continue to raise our voices on that. But Brenda, I certainly agree with you. It's not doing the job, but it's just making things more expensive at a time when nobody needs things to be more expensive. So I appreciate you reaching out with that question.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Brenda. We're about halfway through our time together tonight, so it's not too late to ask your question. If you are joining us by phone, you can hit *3 to get in the queue to ask your question. And if you're joining us by Facebook or on YouTube, you can email us at nstownhall@novascotia.ca to ask your question. We're going to go to Dartmouth next. We're going to go to Katie, and Katie has a question about healthcare workers. Go ahead, Katie, with your question.
Yes, I was just wondering how come the healthcare workers in Nova Scotia aren't all working to their full scope of practice? Like one example would be the registered nurses that currently work in the emergency department aren't able to use their full scope in assessing a patient that comes to the emergency and tell them, like, you don't need to see somebody right away, or that's something that you can treat at home. They're not allowed to provide the advice. Whereas like a nurse, if you call 811, is able to call and they can triage them and do a full assessment and give them the advice that the best thing for you to do would be stay home and do X, Y, or Z. So I'm wondering why our full scope isn't being used for all the healthcare professionals.
Yep, thank you, Katie, and they should be for sure. I get a little frustrated every time I hear concrete examples like you've just shared with that. There's absolutely, in my mind, no reason why every healthcare professional across the spectrum should not be working to their full scope of practice. They should be allowed to do what they're trained to do. Fixing healthcare, it requires many hands. You know, many hands make light work, and we need everyone doing everything they can. So the Patient Access to Care Act that I talked about earlier, just in the common sense credentialing, in the recruitment and retention part of things, that same act, it really did three things. So the first one was what I talked about on common sense credentialing. The second thing would be exactly what you're speaking to, scope of practice. So that act allows us to increase the scope of practice for healthcare professionals. And before that act, it would normally require something like going to the legislature and amending the Physiotherapist Act of 19 whatever, and making a change to allow them to do more in the example of physiotherapists. But with the Patient Access to Care Act, we can cut through that kind of nonsense and just make it so people can work to their full scope of practice. So I am anxious for everyone to work to their full scope of practice. I think we've made great strides in the pharmacist area, particularly allowing pharmacists to work to their full scope of practice. There is more work to do for other healthcare professionals. You've given a very concrete example on nurses in the emergency department. I like that example. Of course, given that the issues we sometimes have around some of our emergency departments, that makes perfect sense to me, that if we have qualified people in there, they should be allowed to do what they're trained to do. So I will take that one away, Katie. And at the same time, what I would ask you and any healthcare professional who may be listening in or that you have a chance to interact with and talk to, go to your licensing board and say to them, why we're trained to do this, why can't we do it in Nova Scotia? Because I will assure you, you have a health leadership team and you have a premier who are inclined to let you work to your full scope of practice. It is what is absolutely necessary now. So thank you for reaching out with that example for sure. And I'll take that one away. But as there are others, let's get them done. Let's get healthcare workers doing what they're trained to do. That's what Nova Scotians want.
We are seeing some questions come in by email now, so bear with me as I read this one out. Mr. Hood emailed in and is wondering what your stance is regarding surgical wait times in our province. He said he was on the wait list for 2 years and had his surgery canceled 3 times before he got his surgery done earlier this month. What is your government doing to address these types of wait times?
Thank you, Mr. Hood. I'm sorry that happened to you. Those types of wait times, 2 years. I understand the impact that would have on your own life satisfaction, your family, your ability to be productive in work and all these things. It's just sad when we see that. So I'm sorry that happens to you and so many others. Wait times have been an issue in this province for some time. They were certainly an issue even before the pandemic. The pandemic made them worse. But what I would say is we're focused on wait times. We have talked about better utilization of our operating rooms, supporting our surgeons who want to do more surgeons, and we do have. We are starting to see a little bit of good news on this file. The wait list has been reduced in a number of different surgical areas and across all different surgeries. I think the wait list has been reduced by about 4,000 people more than last year. So if we look at the surgeries across the province, we would have did somewhere in the range of close to 2,000 more surgeries this year than in the year 2019, 2020, which would be the year before the pandemic. So I'm sorry that you experienced that type of a wait time of over a couple of years. We are still working to get those lists down. We will make sure that we continue to focus on this. And it's going to take some work and it's going to take some time, but myself and Minister Thompson are very focused on the issue. And I think some of the areas we've made particularly good progress would be around eye surgery, I think in some of the ortho surgeries as well. But we know we have to do it across the spectrum. It will require recruitment. It will require keeping our surgeons that we have. It will require partnerships with organizations that have the space, the operating rooms, the equipment and stuff to get surgeries done. But we won't stop until those wait lists are addressed and are fair to Nova Scotians, because I don't think those wait lists are fair to Nova Scotians right now. But I'm happy to hear that you got the surgery. I hope it went well, and we'll continue to tackle that issue.
Thank you, Premier. And thank you, Mr. Hood, for emailing your question in. If you are also joining us by Facebook or by YouTube, you can email your question in as well at nstownhall@novascotia.ca. And for those of you joining us by phone, all you have to do is hit *3 to get in the queue to ask your question. We'll go back to the phone line now. We have a question from Kim, and Kim wants to talk about both immigration and housing. Kim, go ahead with your question.
Hi, Tim. Appreciate the chance to ask you something. I'm sure all Nova Scotians are exhausted, as is you. My question is, we've had a lot of immigration hit the province. You go either way on it, but you can't deny the impact. There was a shortage of housing before we've gotten the immigration boom, and to me, that just seems to compound that housing issue. And you think infrastructure more strain, healthcare system more strain, just a lot of stuff. If it's 1,000 homeless in Nova Scotia right now, that may seem small in the terms of our population, but it shouldn't ever be that way. So I guess my question is, with outrageous rents, $2,000 for bachelor's apartments, a lot of people in this province work minimum wage jobs. It's like a strain. And we have 1,000 people living on our streets, all different reasons, but it's still a fact that they are. Would you ever consider, back in the 70s, it was more emphasis on social housing through the federal government, co-ops, and just a lot more social housing. Would you ever consider going full in on something like that, or look into new creative things? A motel goes up for sale, buy it, make it affordable units. I've seen that done in Dartmouth, that one, and it was great. So just what do you think with all this immigration, the impact with our housing?
Yeah.
What are your solutions or thoughts to get us out of all this?
Yeah, look, Kim, thank you for reaching out and articulating your thoughts so eloquently, for sure. A couple things I would say. No question, our population is growing, and certainly that growth is coming from immigration. The immigration is part of our population growth. Migration is also part of our population growth. People moving from other parts of the country, maybe moving home to Nova Scotia, maybe just moving here to make their life here. But so our population is growing. We've had incredible population growth. Our province would normally grow by about 5,000 people a year. In the most recent kind of year-over-year numbers, our province grew by 40,000 people. It's incredible growth. Growth is a good thing. People drive our economies. A lot of those people who are moving here might be working in healthcare. A lot of those people who are moving here might be starting a business. So there's all kinds of reasons why people move here, but our population is growing for sure. And whilst I think that growth is a very good thing, I am not so naive as to say it doesn't come without its challenges. We are experiencing the challenges of growth. I would say that I would accept willingly, as Premier, the challenges of growth any day. I will accept the challenges of growth, because in this province we've also seen the challenges on the other side, the challenges of decline, schools closing, businesses closing, communities shrinking. So you have challenges in government. You accept the challenges, and we want growth, but we want planned for, structured growth, that we're being thoughtful about how we're growing and where we're growing. So for sure, we are seeing challenges in housing. There's absolutely no question about that. You mentioned the homelessness number. It's a concern. I come across a lot of Nova Scotians who are living at home at times when they wish they had their own place. That's a reality for many Nova Scotians. So what do we do about it? We are building more housing, and we are building more affordable housing. So we are making investments directly into affordable housing, for sure. And we're making a concerted effort to get more houses built. I do believe that the answer to a housing crisis is more housing across the price spectrum. So that means we need single family homes, and we need apartments, and we need duplexes. We need housing across the spectrum. We need it across the province. So we're building it faster than has been done in decades. We created a new housing agency and a housing task force in HRM to look at the permitting process. How long is it taking to get permits? Can we get permits approved? Those that should be approved, can we get them approved quicker? And I talked to all kinds of developers who are wanting to build a subdivision, and they've been for years trying to get approval. So I believe in government, in trying to get to a government that serves people, that says yes or says no. Sometimes it's yes. It's not always yes, but sometimes it has to be yes, and sometimes it's no. But what I don't like is the maybes. And maybe speak in government is, we need another report, we need another study. If it's a yes for a subdivision, then let's get going on building those homes for Nova Scotians. If it's a no, then it's a no, and we should just say that. Don't bother asking for more studies and dragging things out. So we as a province, that was part of the stuff around the housing task force. We as a province have also are in the process of making provincial land that's suitable for housing available for housing. We'll continue to do that. We're also looking at innovative solutions, modular housing for healthcare workers. We saw that modular housing for those impacted by the fires, by the devastating fires. So these are types of initiatives that are innovative, and once we get going on them, then we can roll them out for other purposes as well. And there's all kinds of opportunity there. But in terms of the affordability issue and the homelessness issue, I don't want to leave this question without assuring you that our government is making historic investments and improvements to the existing public housing stock, and also looking for ways to add to that stock. We invested $50 million on more than 400 projects across the province, 300 buildings, 4,700 units. So yes, we'll look at innovative ways. Yes, we will partner with anyone who has an idea on how to get people housed. We want people housed. We know housing is a determinant of health as well. We know the impacts it has, and we know people are struggling. So we'll make those investments. We're trying to work with the municipalities. As much as we make provincial land available, we're asking them, what municipal land do you have available? Is it suitable for housing? And there's all kinds of innovative projects that we're looking at assessing. Now, tiny homes. We can put tiny homes in a certain area. You mentioned hotels. You mentioned just using space that currently desperately exists for housing in new ways, we're game for that. We want people properly housed. We'll continue to make the investments, and we'll continue to work with partners and groups that are focused on supporting Nova Scotians in need of housing. But it's an issue right now, there's no question.
Thank you, Premier. Next, we're going to head to beautiful Oakfield, Nova Scotia, and we're going to talk again about healthcare. So Bob from Oakfield is joining us now. Go ahead, Bob, with your question.
Yeah, Tim, my question is kind of a weird question, but it's the reality of where we are with healthcare today is how come I can get better healthcare for my pets than I can for my family in Nova Scotia?
Well, look, I guess what I would say is the healthcare issues that we've been facing in this province are real, and healthcare has been broken for a long time, decades probably. Our campaign was on fixing healthcare, and we're committed to that. And I do believe, as I say, as I'm an impatient person, I want things to happen faster. I do believe that progress is being made. I mentioned the Patient Access to Care Act. That's about healthcare human resources. That's about common sense credentialing, allowing a clear path for people who are properly trained and have the experience to get here to Nova Scotia. That's an important part of it. Supporting those in the that are already working in healthcare, so we can keep them. That's an important part of the plan. Pharmacy clinics. Pharmacy clinics are having an incredible impact on access to care for people. I'll give you one example. Just in the first few months of this calendar year, when we had a small pilot project with a few pharmacies where we allowed them to do expanded scope, I think there was only 12 pharmacies in that pilot. It's up to, I think it's 36 or close to 40 now. We'll continue to expand that. But when there was only 12, those pharmacies in the first couple months of the year had seen thousands of Nova Scotians and helped them. And just in that short period of time, at that time they had seen, I think it was 4,000 Nova Scotians that they did strep tests on. That number's way higher now. But at the time, it was 4,000 just across those few pharmacies. And I know where those people would have went if they didn't go to the pharmacy. They would have went to the emergency department. So that means that's a way we can divert people away from the emergency department, take pressure off the emergency department, get people the health that they need. So pharmacy clinics, mobile clinics, virtual care. I can't stress enough that we understand that we need more doctors. We understand that we need more healthcare professionals in many areas across the full delivery of healthcare. But in the meantime, things like virtual care are helping. We'll roll out more of those, more access points soon. But we know there's work to be done in healthcare. We put an entire plan out. It's called the Action for Health Plan. That plan is available online. And I would just say to you, if you're feeling discouraged, Bob, and if you're ever feeling like there's nothing happening, go online, look at that Action for Healthcare plan, and you will see an extensive pages and pages of action items that the government is working on. And you will see timelines on which ones have been done and which ones are in progress and which ones are still to be done. There is work to be done, but at the same time, work is being done. A lot of work is being done, and in many ways, we're leading the country. Many other jurisdictions are looking at what's happening here in Nova Scotia, and they're saying, wow, we're going to do that. We're going to follow that. And I said, fill your boots and follow it, because we're leading the country. We're very focused on it. But the Action for Health plan may be of interest to you, Bob. It may alleviate some of your concerns, but the needle is moving, and that's what I'm hearing from healthcare professionals, that the needle is moving. We know there's further to go, but when the people working in the system start to feel, they get the hope return, they start to feel the progress, that's the first step. So we're at the first step. We have many steps, but don't give up. Progress is happening.
Great. Our next topic is one that's important to many Nova Scotians, mental health. We'll talk to Janice from Lower Sackville on mental health. Janice, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Premier Houston. I have a question with regards to the mental health care, which of course is a huge issue these days. I'm wondering when MSI is going to cover more mental health services, because people that are employed full-time, they often have health care plans that can cover mental health services, but are only covered for a certain amount and may only get 4 or 5 sessions a year. Unfortunately, those that are working part-time, and some people are working more than one part-time job, they're not entitled to health care services with regards to mental health care. And it's my firm belief that when people have access to mental health care, they become better employees, better citizens, happier people, and benefit everybody, I think, in my personal opinion. And I just find that people are suffering from mental health issues a lot lately, and it's being brought to the forefront. Obviously, given all the devastation that we've had from the lockdown with COVID, all the wildfires, the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, life in general is just more stressful. And I'm wondering, is there any consideration to increase coverage under MSI for regular mental health treatment?
Thank you, Janice. You're absolutely right about the pressures people are feeling from the natural disasters that you've mentioned, from the cost of living, from the pressures of life, for sure. It's putting a lot of pressure on people, absolutely. So we're focused on what I would call addictions and mental health. We have Minister Comer. He's the Minister for Addictions and Mental Health. That's the first minister that we've had in this province who's dedicated to addictions and mental health. So that's somebody at the highest level of government, at the cabinet table, advocating for improved addictions and mental health services. So Minister Comer is doing a lot of work in this area, and he's a great person and highly qualified for that. He's a registered nurse himself who focused a lot on mental health. So he knows what he's talking about when he talks about this. So that minister role, that dedicated office, are focused on this. And you're exactly speaking on the coverage issue through the MSI is something that I'm very passionate about. Addictions and mental health is one of the last. It's an area of two-tiered coverage. And in health, we have universal health care, but you shouldn't have to pay for health care in this province, in this country. But in addictions and mental health, we have two tiers. If you have money, you can get coverage from a private place, and that's not fair to those that can. So we want universal mental health coverage. We're working with, it's actually something that was in our campaign platform. It was something I campaigned on. There's a lot of research being done on how we would roll that out in a way that's fair to Nova Scotians, that opens up the care, because we have people who are totally qualified to help Nova Scotians who are working in the private sector. They have their own company, and they're providing it, and we want to mobilize those resources, those people, those experts for the benefit of all Nova Scotians. And that's what universal addictions and mental health care means to me, is that we mobilize all the resources to help people. So we're working with the federal government. There's a few nuances to make that happen. I would be honest to say that there were nuances that I wasn't quite aware of that we're trying to work through. So we want universal care to be available to those that need it. It's what's good for our society. It's good for Nova Scotians. So we are working on that. It's happening, and I'm hopeful that we get there. And I'm hopeful that Minister Comer will get us there. In the meantime, we have instituted a number of additional supports. We have mental health day supports in hospitals. We just opened a new one this week in Cape Breton. We'll continue to add those resources. We've expanded supportive counseling, so we are expanding supportive counseling that's available. We're supporting community partners who are delivering services to the people in their community. So there are things happening. There are more things to be done, no question, and I myself am hopeful that we can get there on the universal mental health care. It's so important. I absolutely agree with you, Janice, and I really appreciate you raising that tonight.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I am sorry to those that we didn't get to. Michelle, Sandra, Dawn, Marion, I see all of your questions, and I am sorry that we didn't have a chance to talk to you tonight, but please know that the conversation does not have to end here. You can email your questions to nstownhall@novascotia.ca, and we'll continue to monitor that email, and we look forward to seeing your comments come in. Now, before we wrap, I'll give the Premier a chance to close us out.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. It means an incredible amount to me that you would take time on your evening to interact in this and ask a question where you can or submit a question. These interactions are really helpful to me as your premier. Anytime we have a chance to chat and about these things and I can hear directly from you, it refocuses me and re-energizes me. So if you see me on the street, say hi, and if you got an issue you want to raise with me, raise that too. Those interactions help me a lot. It's been a heavy time for our province, and I see it and I hear it when I'm interacting with Nova Scotians. But I want you to know that as a government, we'll do whatever we can to support Nova Scotians. We'll do whatever we can to take care of Nova Scotians. It's always going to be true that I personally and our government will wish we could do more. We'll always want to do more, but we will absolutely do what we can. But through historic storms, or whatever is thrown at us, we're Nova Scotia strong. I hope we don't have to keep proving it so often, but we are. That Blue Noser spirit shines through in the way people step up and help each other, and our first responders, but in our friends and neighbors who are always there for each other. So we'll rebuild. We'll get through this. We'll support each other, and as a government, we will do what we can to make sure that we're there to support you when you need us to be there. But thanks for tuning in tonight, and please, as Marla said, submit your questions, and we're happy to get back to you. But I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.